Hi there. Can you hear me, Jessica?
I can. You can hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. Thanks for inviting me to join you guys today.
Yeah, this is great. So this is our 16th niche conversation. I'm Jessica DeWitt. I'm one of the editors here at the network in Canadian History and Environment. And today I'm joined by Dave Cournoyer. Would you like to tell us more about yourself?
For sure. Thank you. And yeah, again, thanks so much for having me on today. I'm looking forward to a fun little conversation. My name's Dave Cournoyer. I'm based here in Edmonton, Alberta, where it is. We're coming out of a bit of a deep freeze right now. It was about minus 36 or something for basically the past week, so it was quite cold. But it's nice. It's a nice and balmy minus 15 outside right now.
Yeah.
I'm here in Edmonton. I write a political website, political blog, and host a podcast called the Alberta Podcast and a website at .ca. And I've been writing about Alberta politics for about 16 years now on this website. So it's there's a lot going on. There's always a lot going on in Alberta politics. There's this kind of myth that Alberta politics is boring and the outcome is always predetermined. And that might have been the case 20 years ago, but nowadays everything is up in the air. It's pretty wild here in Alberta politics these days.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm in Saskatoon, so I can relate to the frigidness of the past week. I can actually see out my window today, so that's exciting.
Oh, that's a bonus.
Um, Yeah, so I invited you here today because you wrote a piece called The Coal Truth, and Nothing But the Truth, which we republished on NiCHE. So this is about the Alberta Coal Truth Office, and I thought we'd start off by what exactly was this office and how did you find out information about it?
Well, first, before I get into what the coal office was, I want to give a bit of credit to the two people who kind of clued me into the fact that this coal office actually existed. And this was kind of I'd heard, I'd known that the Alberta government had gone and marketed coal and done stuff, promoting coal in the 1920s when coal was really becoming a big thing. But it wasn't until I saw two tweets, one tweet from Andrew Leach from the University of Alberta, and another tweet from Tony Clark, who's a researcher with the Alberta Federation of Labor, and they were tweeting documents that both made reference to something called the Alberta Coal Truth Office. And I don't even know if the documents that they or the tweets that they were sharing actually specifically had to do with the Coal Truth Office, but it obviously made me wonder, well, what the heck is this Coal Truth Office? I'd never heard of this before. It sounds like, what a strange name for a government office. So I started to look into it, and I started to try to access some of the more publicly accessible documents. So I looked on newspapers.com. I did ProQuest searches. I looked through the provincial archives of Alberta. The Legislative Assembly library has a very useful database of old news clippings. So I was able to find a certain amount of public information about it. It was the 1920s, so not all of that information has been digitized or is easily accessible from your computer. I'm sure if I went down to the provincial archives myself, when we're allowed to do that once again, I'd be able to find more, and I hope to in the future. But what the Alberta Coal Truth Office was, so it was around 1920, the Alberta government was trying to market the sale and defend the reputation of Alberta coal. There was a substantial coal boom in terms of exploration and development of new coal mines in Alberta in the 1910s and 1920s. And what Alberta found itself, the Alberta government wanted to market that coal. So one of the places that it decided, or I guess the main place that it decided that it would focus on marketing Alberta coal was Winnipeg. And it may seem kind of strange right now to think, well, Winnipeg, it's a medium-sized prairie city. Why did the Alberta government focus on Winnipeg? Winnipeg in 1920 was the third largest city in Canada. It was nicknamed the Chicago of the North. It was the hub of train transportation between Western Canada and Ontario and Quebec and the Maritimes. So it was a very important city, not only simply because of its size, but because of its economic position in Canada. So the Alberta government decided to open up this office, and it appears that the purpose behind the office was to help market the sale of coal for domestic use. So we're talking about people burning coal in their houses for heat. And then in industry, factories burning coal and whatnot. So it's not necessarily not necessarily the same type of way that a government would market coal today, or even a company would market coal today, because there aren't many people in Canada today who still burn coal to heat their houses. Um, so the office was maintained, opened in 1920, and it was maintained by a number of fuel engineers that were paid by the Alberta government to be there and ostensibly help people make the decision to buy coal and assist them in terms of how to use Alberta coal for domestic use. So I'm not sure if they were actually physically going out to people's houses to help them, put the coal in and explain, why Alberta coal was the best. But that seems to be one of the roles they played. So the marketing and the sale of coal, and then the second kind of role they played, which you end up seeing a lot of coverage in the newspaper, is the political defense of coal. So defending the reputation of Alberta coal, and there was even a quote from the chief engineer at the Alberta Coal Office that defended Alberta coal almost as more ethical and efficient as coal from the United States, perhaps, or from Ontario or Quebec, which is where some of the markets that Alberta was competing with at the time. Mm-hmm. So the office was open in 1920, and as far as I can tell, it stayed open until about 1925 or 24-25, when I guess somewhat ironically, the building which the office was in actually burnt down. And the last record I've been able to find of the existence of the Alberta Coal Truth Office was an article in the Winnipeg Tribune in December 1924, which reported that the building had burned down and the office planned to reopen in the future, but it seemed to drop off the map after that, from what I've been able to find.
Yeah, I found the piece fascinating, and there's really great images included, so I encourage everyone to head over to either your blog or our site and look at those. It's really propaganda at its finest, I think.
Absolutely.
So what does this piece of history that you've unearthed kind of tell us about current Alberta politics, or how does it relate to it, what we're seeing?
Well, I mean, it shows that there's a long history of Alberta governments willing to go to great lengths to market the private sale of its natural resources, right? Because when I talk about the sales that the government of Alberta was promoting in 1920, this wasn't an Alberta government-owned crown corporation. These were privately owned companies that the Alberta government was helping market and helping sale. And we see similar things today. And I mean, this is something you see in the course of Alberta history since we started really developing our natural resources here. And you see it today with the current Alberta government, the United Conservative Party government. In last year, they created something that was called the Canadian Energy Centre, which was the known to many as the Energy War Room, and it was kind of branded by the government before it officially launched. And the whole point of the Energy War Room, ostensibly similar to the Coal Truth Office, was to defend the reputation of Alberta's oil and gas sector from foreign interests and in scary environmentalists and whatnot. And I mean, I don't necessarily think they had this, the environmental movement in 1920 wasn't anything that it looked like today, but it seems to be that the mandates were somewhat similar in terms of the kind of propaganda being produced by and find was a document the Coal Truth Office in 1922, 1923 called, let me see if I can find one, don't want to get this wrong, called Coal Truth, Stored Alberta Sunshine. So they were branding Alberta coal as Stored Alberta Sunshine. And it's a big document. It's essentially, it's half a sales document, half a propaganda document, because a big chunk of the document, you can find it on either of our websites. The Internet Archive, thankfully, someone was able to find a physical copy and digitize it and upload it. So it's now, we have it forever. And the booklet goes through and it explains like how to use coal, which seems a little, I mean, reading first, when you first look at it, it seems a little benign, but then you start to look at like what the messaging is and what the images they're using. And it's very much a propaganda piece to promote Alberta coal as better than coal from other places, as if Alberta coal, as if burning coal from Alberta is better than burning coal from North Dakota or from Virginia. So the government really went out of its way to try to market and promote Alberta coal. It seems to be using this kind of a similar kind of public relations technique or kind of a primitive public relations technique to what's being used by the Canadian Energy Centre right now in terms of it being basically a government public relations subsidy. And you saw the Coal Truth Office take out big advertisements in the Winnipeg Tribune, promoting Alberta coal. You saw a representative of the Alberta government actually try to intervene in a public inquiry that was launched by the federal government, because at the time there were allegations of a price fixing combine that Alberta coal companies were alleged to have taken part of or been part of to drive up prices in the Winnipeg market. So there was a big federal commission that was appointed and investigated, and at the time the lawyer from the Alberta government actually made the argument that the public inquiry should be held in private, at least the parts that were related to Alberta. Otherwise, it might actually damage Alberta's coal industry. So you see similar parallels with the public inquiry into anti-Alberta energy campaigns that's currently being held in Alberta totally in private, to kind of weed out the enemies or the perceived enemies that the current government believes are stopping the conspiracy forces that are stopping the sale or besmirching the reputation of Alberta's oil and gas sector.
Yeah, I love this. I love pieces of history like this that we can connect so clearly to today, and that's why this piece stuck out to me, and I really wanted to share it with more people. And of course, as a historian who does a lot of public-facing work, this is kind of like the bread and butter of what I love to do. So I was wondering, for the end of our conversation, if you could just comment a little bit about how you use history more broadly in the political blogging and other work that you do.
For sure. So I write a lot about Alberta politics, and I talk a lot about Alberta politics on my podcast, but I love Alberta's political history. Alberta is a fascinating place politically. We are a province of contradictions. We are at one point we're the most conservative place in the province or in the country, and at another point we're the home of the creation of the CCF and bizarre movements like the social credit movement, which is one of kind of my favorite very strange, bizarre periods in Alberta history. The period between 1935 and 1945, the height of the Great Depression, the very strange, extremely ideological pseudo-fascist government of William Aberhart, Bible Bill. It was a very fascinating time, very scary time in Alberta politics. But so Alberta's kind of been a bit of a testing ground testing ground. Yeah, I guess a testing ground is might be the right word, for some kind of more extreme, bizarre, offbeat ideologies. They seem to sometimes take root here in Alberta. So it provides, Alberta political history is fascinating, and I love providing context to that, because we need, knowing our history is so important, as we're so focused on. It's so easy to focus on the current news cycle and what's right in front of us, when if we know a little bit more of our history, it helps provide a lot of context about why things are today, and maybe why Alberta politics is the way it is today.
Yeah, that's great. I've written about the development of provincial parks in Alberta for my dissertation, and I wrote about it alongside 3 other provinces and states. And the Alberta politics part I'm still wrapping my head around it. It's so complicated. But it was definitely my favorite political background to what I was writing about, because I was writing also about Ontario and Idaho and Pennsylvania. The Alberta politics situation always seems really fascinating and different to me. So I appreciate that. And I just want to thank you for joining me today, for sharing this piece, for allowing us to republish it on NiCHE and to share it around. And thank you, and have a good day.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jessica.
Yeah. Take care.
Cheers.